How do you take someone's actual handwritten signature and convert it into a brilliant vector electronic signature that doesn't blur, doesn't pixelate, and can scale to whatever size you want? Today, I'm going to show you how to do exactly that as we convert the signature into vector format. Now, this is very helpful when you're building things like emails, PDFs, direct mail letters, anything where someone might want that personal touch of a signature, but where it would be impractical or impossible for them to actually sign it. After all, you can't truly sign an email, and there's no way for a person to sign hundreds or even thousands of letters. So to start the process, I always like to start here in Photoshop. Now, we can't create the actual vector image here, but cleaning it up on this side first will go a long way in helping us later on. So we have our image here taken on a cell phone. Now, years ago when I would do this, I would always request somebody scan their signature on a high quality scanner. Nowadays, that really doesn't happen very often, and it's just as likely that someone is just going to send you a photo from their cell phone, which is totally fine. Not everyone has a scanner, and we can still work with this. So to start out, I always like to go up to Image, Auto Tone, or just use the shortcut Shift-Control-L or Shift-Command-L on a Mac. Now, as soon as we click on that, we can see it immediately takes out those warm yellow tones. That was the room lighting from the photo and had an overly warm cast to it. So this helps bring things back to that neutral black and white of the paper that makes our editing a lot easier. Now, the next thing I like to do is go back up to Image and go down to Adjustments, Levels, or we can use the shortcut Control-L or Command-L on a Mac. Now that will bring up our Levels Adjustment panel. Now for this, I always like to take the white point slider and bring it to just before those levels start to peak. And you can see that that took out all of our paper texture, all of that paper grain, and it made our background perfectly white. And then for the dark point slider, I do the same thing. We'll grab that dark point slider and we'll drag that to just after those levels go down. Now we start getting rid of all that speckle that's inside of our letters, really getting us back to that black and white feel now. And you can see if we check and uncheck that preview box just how much that changed. Wow. So we're already well on our way, but that covers us here, so let's go ahead and hit OK. Now we can see that we have a pretty great start for our signature. It's black and white, it actually looks fairly presentable already, but we want this to be a vector signature for the best possible quality. So we're going to go ahead and hit Control-A or Command-A on a Mac to select our canvas, and then Control-C or Command-C on a Mac to copy everything to our clipboard. And now we'll head on over to Illustrator. All right, so here we are in Illustrator. We have our document all ready to go. Don't worry about the particular size or settings for this. Since we're going to be making this a vector, we can scale that to any size we want. So it really doesn't matter what our initial settings are. So first things first, let's go ahead and paste our signature. That's Control-V or Command-V for our Mac friends. So now that we have our signature here in Illustrator, we're going to go ahead and take this photo and turn it into our vector. So in order to do that, we'll go up to Object, Image Trace, Make. Now make sure it's not Make and Expand yet. We still need to make some adjustments before we call this final. So for now, just Make. Now it may pop up this warning saying that the tracing may proceed slowly because it's a large image. Don't worry about that. You can just hit OK. All right, so that made our image trace, but we want to make a few fine adjustments. So to do that, let's go ahead and go up to Window and then go down to Image Trace. And that will bring up our image trace options. Now, the very first thing I like to do here is hit that Advanced tab, and then I'll go down to where it says Ignore Color. And I'll go ahead and click that box. Now, you probably can't see any difference on your screen, but what that did is it took out all of the white from our image trace. So now it's only keeping the black, which is what we want. Not to mention, it will take the background out of our signature, allowing us to use it on any background later on. So it's always a good idea to do this. And I like to do this first so that it's not constantly trying to figure out what to do with those white areas as I'm adjusting my settings. So for my other adjustments, I like to have the threshold relatively high. That way we're bringing in as much of that black and as much of our signature as possible. Then usually I'll take the noise down to 0. And then for paths, it kind of depends. The higher we go on paths, the more accurate the detail is. But sometimes that can bring in a lot of the jitter from our paper texture. So sometimes it's okay to go relatively low on that as well. But you don't want to go so low with it that it starts making your signature look a bit cartoony. So there's no exact settings here, just use your best judgment. At the end of the day, these sliders are only as good as the designer operating them. And then for corners, in our case, I'm going to keep those relatively low as well, probably somewhere around 20. But again, use your best judgment. It's going to be different for every image, so just go with what looks right to you. So now that those settings are all just about where we want them, let's go ahead and hit expand. And now we have our vector signature, so we can go ahead and close out of that dialog box. And now we can see everything's looking really, really nice. So if we took this as it is right now, it would probably still be worlds better than most signatures that people are using out there. But we're not most people. We want to take this a step further and make sure that we have as high quality of signature as possible. So what I like to do, and this is one of my absolute favorite tools, is go up here to the smooth tool, which is under our shaper and pencil tools. And if you don't see it here, you can always go down to these 3 dots at the bottom of our toolbar, and that will help you find it as well. So the first thing I'm going to do is to select our signature using our selection tool or the shortcut V, and then we'll select our signature. And then I'll go back over to our smooth tool, and I'm just going to run this over some of those rougher edges. And we can see as soon as I let go of the mouse, it starts smoothing out those edges. Now, I'm not trying to get rid of too much of the character. We still want a lot of the natural flow of the signature, but I'm just trying to get rid of some of those problem areas. If we make it too smooth, it starts looking a little bit too robotic, and we don't want that. But we do want it to look professional and as high quality as possible. So I'm just going to keep running it over some of these areas, and we can see it keeps smoothing out our signature. And it's doing a very nice job. Now I'll note that I do like doing this with the smooth tool as opposed to something like the simplify paths tool, because this gives us the maximum control. We can smooth just the areas that we want and leave everything else alone. Some of those other simplify path tools can do it uniformly across their entire signature, and that makes things start to look a little bit cartoony. We still want this to look real, but also still professional. Now, as we've been working, you might have noticed that our selection narrowed down to just the areas that are touching the first part that we started working on. So in our case, the first thing we started working on was this D. It was our highest priority since it was right there in the middle. But that deselected all of the letters that weren't touching the D. So in order to work on another area, like this AX over here, we'll need to bring back up our selection tool. So that's the shortcut V again, and we'll select the whole signature one more time. And then we'll go back over to our smooth tool, and now we can start smoothing out this area over here. And again, just like before, we can see that now it's only selecting the letters that are touching this area that we're working on. And that goes for the inside of our shapes as well. We can see that now only the outside is selected. So in order to work on the inside of this A, for example, we need to go back to our selection tool with the V shortcut, and then go back to our smooth tool. And now if we start working on the inside of that shape, now only the inside is selected. And we can start working on smoothing that area. And so I'll keep doing that around our signature. I'll go back to the V selection tool, and then go back to the smooth tool, and I'll just keep going around smoothing sections that look like they need a little bit of help. There's no perfect method to this. It's just kind of going by eye and what looks the best to you. So anywhere where you see a little bit of roughness, go ahead and run your smooth tool right over it. You don't have to be too precise with this. The tool usually knows roughly what you're trying to accomplish, and it's pretty good at getting the idea of what you're going for. So just kind of go around and find areas that you think might look better if they were a little bit smoother. And don't be ashamed to use your Control-Z undo either. It's probably not going to look perfect the first time, so a little bit of back and forth never hurt anybody. Now, one other thing that I'll mention briefly is sometimes we get these stray areas, like in the inside of this D, we can see there's a few of those white elements where it got confused about what to do. So if we just click on this a few times, it enters us into isolation mode. And then once we get down to that compound path and we select those white areas, we can select just those and then hit delete. And that will get rid of some of those white areas that are inside of our letters. So we can do that with the D here. I'll probably go ahead and do that with the X here as well. So again, just clicking a few times until that's selected, hitting delete, and then either hitting escape or double clicking on our artboard to bring that back. And then same thing over here with the tail of this Z. So I'll just click into there a few times and then start selecting these white areas. But I won't get rid of all of them. I'm going to leave a few of these towards the end. That'll help bring a little bit of that character in, and it will help it look a little bit more natural, like the flow of the pen. but we don't want it everywhere. So again, like the top of this A, let's click on that a few times and we'll get rid of that top white area. So that's starting to look really nice. So now we can see this isn't perfectly smooth. There are a few areas like the top of this J here, or the tail of our Z, or the D, or some of the areas over here that are still looking a little bit ununiform. And that's okay. That helps our signature still look authentic, real, and not computer generated. So I think that's actually as far as I'm going to take it today. And you can imagine if this was a little bit smaller that it will look even more natural. So if it's going to appear something like that size, it's looking really good. And we don't need to oversimplify it much more than that. So I'm comfortable leaving it there, but again, just use your best judgment for the signature that you are working on. The most valuable thing you have as a designer is your judgment. So I can't tell you exactly when your signature is finished, but hopefully you can. So now we have our final vectorized signature. It won't blur, it won't pixelate, and we can use it anywhere we need it. So hopefully this video helped. It's something I do have people ask me about more often than you might think. So hopefully this helped one or two of you out there. But now that you have the key to creating vector signatures, what about vector QR codes? Now that method is a little bit different, and I have a video right here to walk you through the whole process.